Hello and welcome to today's Healthcare EcoCast event. We're talking about healthcare technology, healthcare IT, solutions for healthcare on today's event. And I'm excited to be joined by Datrium, Nutanix, Pivot3, and Unitrends. All the speakers today will be focusing on healthcare technology. And we've got a great keynote speaker lined up for you, and that is Mr. Keith Townsend, better known as the CTO Advisor. Thank you so much for joining us on the Healthcare EcoCast. This is going to be a great event, and if you're interested in healthcare IT, healthcare technology, I think you're going to learn a lot and enjoy the event. Now, before we get started, we've got a little bit of housekeeping that we first need to cover. First off, my name is David Davis. I'm of ActualTech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator on today's event. I've been in the industry a long time, writing, blogging, and speaking, and as a co-founder at ActualTech Media, we created the MegaCast and EcoCast event series because we really felt like IT professionals needed an efficient, quick way to learn about innovative enterprise technology, to do it all online, to do it virtually. You don't have to go downtown to the convention center like I used to when I was an IT manager and, pay for parking and fight traffic and all that kind of stuff. You can sit back and relax in your office, or maybe you're lucky enough to be at home on the couch today and learn about the latest enterprise technology solutions. Get all your questions answered. We want this to be a very educational event. I'm very focused on learning and educating everyone out there on enterprise technology. I do that through my video training. I do that through these events, and I hope that you'll be asking as many questions as you'd like on today's event, because we have some really expert speakers on these technologies, experts in healthcare technology. So please ask away and use the questions box there in your audience console. It's on the left side. It says questions and answers. Make sure you use that to ask all the questions you have, and we'll be doing dedicated Q&A sessions at the end of each of the presentations. Now, we also have some awesome prizes to give away. I'll be talking about those and the requirements to be in just a moment. We also have some questions for you, some poll questions, and so I'll be asking you some questions to get your feedback on the technology that you see today, and also, a little bit of demographic background about you out there in the audience. We want this to be a social event, so we'll be tweeting about the event over on Twitter. I'll talk about that hashtag in just a moment, but you can actually tweet directly from your audience console, and if you use that Twitter icon on the bottom of the console, it will automatically append the Twitter hashtag. So you never have to leave the console to tweet, and the hashtag will be automatically appended. And then finally, resources. Just to the left on your console where it says questions and answers, and then just to the right of that, it says handouts. If you click on handouts, there you'll find handouts that have been selected by each of our presenters to help you learn more about their solutions. So I encourage you to check those out. I'll be calling your attention to those later in the event as well. Now, the prizes for today, we're giving out 2 Microsoft Surface Pro 6s. These are some really awesome, I hate to even call them tablets because they are full computers. So we'll be announcing 2 of those, one about roughly in the middle of the event and one at the end of the event. So make sure you stay tuned for those prize drawings. To be eligible, you must submit an IRS Form W-9 if you're a prize winner. I should say, to be eligible, you must meet the prize terms and conditions on our website, events.actualtechmedia.com. You can find a link to that prize term and condition document also in the handouts tab. The primary requirement is that you must be live on the event to be eligible for the drawing. All winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 if you are selected. Now, if you're selected as a prize winner and you want to make a donation to charity, we would love to help you do that. Through these events, we have donated thousands of dollars to charity, thanks to lucky prize winners who are generous and would like to donate that prize to help someone less fortunate. So if you'd like to do that, please let us know when and if you are selected as a prize winner. Now, social media, the hashtag for today is Healthcare EcoCast. I'll be monitoring that hashtag throughout the event over on Twitter. I'll be replying to anyone who tweets. I'll be following pretty much everyone who tweets about the event. So thank you in advance if you should choose to do that. You can also follow ActualTech Media. We'll be tweeting about the event. And feel free to follow me, David M. Davis, over on Twitter as well. Now, we also do a lot on YouTube, Facebook, and we have a podcast called the 10 on Tech Podcast over in the iTunes Store on LinkedIn. So, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we've been posting the latest and greatest content. You can find the link to that up on the top right-hand side of your console. You see an icon there for LinkedIn, for Twitter, and for our YouTube channel. And with that, I'm excited to kick off today's keynote presentation. Here we go.
I'm excited to be joined by Mr. Keith Townsend of the CTO Advisor. Keith, how you doing?
Pretty good, Dave. How's it going?
Going great. It's good to talk to you again. Good to have you on the event today. And we're talking all about healthcare and technology. And so why don't we just kick it off with, tell us a little bit about, what's your background when it comes to healthcare technology?
So I worked for a big pharmaceutical on the north of Chicago. They make the world's biggest drug for about 3.5 years, either as a consultant with PwC or a direct employee.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of experience in healthcare IT. And I know you've also advised many CTOs around the world in some cases, on their technology. And we'll get to more about what you do at the CTO Advisor at the end of the interview here. But let's move on with healthcare and IT. And how do you define healthcare IT? Is it just hospitals?
So as patients, that's probably the thing that we think about the most. Let's think about the three major personas in healthcare IT. There's the buyer, which is the patient, of course. There's the payer, which, we rarely ever, hopefully ever pay our healthcare directly. That's the on the side of the insurance companies, hopefully. And then there's the providers. So hospitals, pharmaceuticals, etc., some kind called pharma. Those are kind of the big three personas, and all of them have very similar challenges.
Okay. So what are their considerations? What are those different parties, what are they most interested in when it comes to technology?
So obviously, healthcare is a life and death issue. Like, there's not many things in IT that's life and death, and healthcare is one of those things. As such, in most countries, especially here in the U.S., there's heavy regulations when it comes to healthcare, and therefore healthcare IT, i.e., in pharma, we have what we call regulated or validated systems. Those systems are under controlled situations so that quality can be maintained throughout the drug creation process. Same thing in hospitals. These systems are under regulated control so that, if you come in for a hangnail, you're not getting a mastectomy.
Right. Okay. And do you think that healthcare and IT, does it move slower than traditional IT organizations?
So, you know what? That's one of the things. I'm a consultant, so I'm going to say it depends. But anytime you have anything that's heavily regulated, if you have to deal with heavily regulated industries, the regulations don't keep up with the technology. Hence the problem. If I want to, a great example is the VA. A lot of the VA Veterans Administration here in the U.S., a lot of that process is centralized around paper. So in order to process claims, you have to fax, like literally have to fax in a form. In other areas, like the innovations around genome research, genomics, etc., moves extremely fast. You put a piece of biomaterial into a scanner, it tears it, rips it apart, scans it, puts it into this amazing machine of processes, and you come out with like amazing medicine on the end. So one end of the scale, it moves extremely slow, where we have fax machines. On another one, we have these really cool genomics machines.
Yeah. In the organizations where it does move slow, do you think there's anything that could be done to speed it up?
So this is where, you run into kind of the promise of cloud and new technologies like robotic process automation. I gave the example of the VA and the fax machine. The VA gave a really great example of how they use robotic process automation. This is where you basically create micros to say, what, I'll receive in a fax via a fax server instead of a server, use OCR to recognize what the order or the process or the claim is. And instead of having a human as a bottleneck in that process, there's a robot basically that takes the input and then puts it into a system like Epic or SAP, which reduces waste, it reduces errors, etc., and speeds up the process. So there's definitely things that can be done within the framework of regulations.
Okay. So yeah, hopefully new technology like that, a cloud, a lot of, innovative enterprise tech, even, on premises, can really help to speed up things and make things easier in IT. What about the technology acquisition process in healthcare organizations? How does that work?
So a lot of times we find ourselves using legacy technologies, not because we don't want to innovate ourselves, but because of regulations. I went into a data center for a healthcare provider that had a compact rack, like full of compact, not ProLiant equipment. It was ProLiant branded, but it was compact ProLiant. And the last time there was a compact name on a ProLiant system, and this stuff looked pristine, like brand new. This was a requirement because they were formulating the drug. So what healthcare providers are starting to realize is that they need to be more abstracted on how they consume material. So if I do some type of pay-as-you-go solution, like what HPE and VMware and all the big providers such as Dell are doing now, and I consume this as a service and I abstract that, well, they can pre-stage all the capacity they want. They can change the underlying physical hardware piece, and I validate my process on the process and not the equipment. So that speeds up the acquisition process. And now I'm not saying, I have to get these 320 gigabyte SAS drives because that's what we validated the system on. I can use the latest and greatest hardware.
Yeah, I used to love those compact servers. I had multiple racks of them, all made in Houston, Texas. Love those things, but that was many years ago. You're right. So no organization should be using that older technology these days. Well, Keith, I've learned a lot about healthcare and technology from you in this short interview. Before we go, I want to talk to you and learn a little bit about what you do at the CTO Advisor.
So obviously, we give advice on enterprise IT. That advice comes in two forms. We do, kind of the traditional management consultant engagements in which we come in, we do assessments, etc. And then we also create content. I've partnered with ActualTech Media several times in which we either get sponsored by a vendor or we just create editorial content in which we share our stories.
Yeah, awesome. And one of my favorite things that you do is your video series that I see on LinkedIn a lot. Can you tell us, what do you do in those videos?
So those are the CTO Dose videos. So if you follow the hashtag CTO Dose on LinkedIn, you'll see, me, whether I'm walking through a concept on my light board or giving my opinion on the latest news, or even talking just about the general challenges of IT and the life in IT and how it relates to business. Those are usually short 5-minute or less videos that you can find on LinkedIn and YouTube, of course, because everyone still does YouTube.
Right. Well, it's been great having you on today. Thanks so much, Keith.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, great interview with Mr. Keith Townsend there. Before I introduce our first presenter on the event today, we've got just a few poll questions that I want to ask you all out there in the audience. And so the first one should be an easy question here. It's just, how many people work at your company? I'm curious to find out. I'll share the results of this with you so you can see how you stack up with your peers on the event. It's good to know what size organizations are attending the Healthcare IT EcoCast today. So I see some responses coming in already. Thank you for those. Let's get a few more responses. I also want to point out that this is a completely live event. So things can sometimes and can go wrong, but if they do go wrong, if you have any trouble, 99% of the time, if you press refresh on your browser, that will solve any technical problem. I saw one person who sent in a message that said they were having some trouble viewing the event. So a refresh on your browser usually works. If that does not do it, I recommend Chrome as the browser of choice, and an incognito or private browsing session inside Chrome usually solves just about any trouble with pop-up blockers or security settings that prevent auto-playing of content. All right, thank you everyone who voted in that poll question or responded. Let me share the results with you. And it looks like 22% of you are from 10,000 plus organizations. Excellent, some very large organizations represented. And then kind of the sweet spot here, looks like 28% are between 100 and 1,000 employees, right there in the middle. And then real good representation kind of all across the board, all the way from small to large organizations. So thank you for responding to that poll question. And then this is an easy one here. Do you work for an organization that focuses on healthcare? We just kind of wanted to find out exactly who out there on the event today really focuses on healthcare. Or maybe you're just learning about healthcare for the future. Maybe you sell to, healthcare organizations. So I'm curious to find out who all works for healthcare organizations. I would think it's the vast majority of the audience today. All right, I appreciate all those responses. And then one last poll question before I introduce our first presenter. And that is, what's your time frame for updating your existing or selecting new healthcare technology solutions? In other words, do you have some sort of project that you're working on? I would think most companies out there, we always have some kind of project. When I was an IT manager, there was always some kind of project we were either currently working on. It might be updating an aging storage array. It might be implementing a new application. It might be putting in a new data protection or disaster recovery solution. There was always something kind of in the queue or in the hopper. So I'll leave that up there for you to answer. All right, thank you everyone who responded to those poll questions. It is time to kick off today's first presentation. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Adam Margett, Technical Specialist at Unitrends. Adam, thanks for joining us.
David, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Doing great. It's a pleasure to have you on again, Adam. Take it away.
Excellent. Really appreciate it, and a good afternoon, good morning to everyone out there on the line, wherever it might be that you dialed in from. As David had mentioned, my name is Adam Margett. I'm a technical specialist here with Unitrends. So I've been trained like a sales engineer, but need to think like a marketer, supporting a lot of our digital and in-person events here. So we're a proud sponsor, happy to be a part of everything that ActualTech Media has going on here. So let's dive in here, kind of get right to it. And our presentation today is really designed to offer prescriptions for healing business continuity and disaster recovery headaches. Unitrends has a long history, 3 decades of experience in this space. We were originally founded actually by a gentleman by the name of Steve Schwartz down in South Carolina, protecting Unix systems for medical customers. In the late 80s, there wasn't a data protection solution in the marketplace that he found adequate to his needs, so worked on architecting and really building out a solution to serve the clients and the folks that he worked closely with. So if you were wondering where the uni in Unitrends came from, it was because we were originally founded protecting Unix systems. Now here, nearly 3 decades later, the company has really evolved, and hope to share that with everyone today. As we've been working through, customers in this particular vertical, the healthcare customers that Unitrends has served here, we've seen some real common themes or some common challenges, and that was what we really wanted to talk about when we thought about how we'd build out and structure this presentation today. Some of those common challenges are strict uptime requirements. It's an industry or a vertical that's heavily targeted by cyber attacks, ransomware, highly regulated with HIPAA compliance mandates, the need for control of highly proprietary or personal information, and also supporting large numbers of non-savvy users, doctors, nurses, administrators that aren't business continuity and backup professionals. How do we provide you with that ease of use to be able to serve a large number of users that don't necessarily have that same level of expertise? But before we talk about more specifically the prescriptions, just wanted to introduce the company for folks. As I had mentioned, we've been around actually celebrating our 30th anniversary here, and we're still based, our research and development teams are still based along with our customer support organization in South Carolina, where originally we're founded. Our corporate offices are a little bit north of Boston in a city called Burlington, Massachusetts, and now today over 30,000 customers across the globe trust Unitrends for their data protection and disaster recovery needs, with a combination of our hardware and software solutions protecting well over 2 exabytes of customer data. And with the Unitrends Cloud, a proprietary manufacturer's developed solution managing well over 100 petabytes of customer data that's living in the Unitrends Cloud. And it's a solution for us that's been built to scale. We have customers that are protecting as small as a few hundred gigabytes with Unitrends to customers that are protecting multiple petabytes of data with Unitrends. And really backing everything that we do, supporting those 30,000 users, is our customer support organization. And I always like to call them out because they do an absolutely fantastic job. And I think given the sensitive nature and the importance of data backup and disaster recovery, they do an absolutely fantastic job, again, supporting our community of users. They're based right here in the United States, available 24/7, by 365, by phone, email, chat, even VPN right into your backup appliance, to review logs and make steps to remediate any issues or errors that have occurred. You can see roughly there a couple of our more recent Stevie Awards that we won this year. I believe it was the 3rd or 4th year in a row that we took home a Gold Stevie Award for customer support. So just want to emphasize again for the folks out there that it's something that we place a tremendous amount of investment, visibility on, and ultimately pride in, that group of engineers that are supporting our product here. But across a lot of the industry verticals with which Unitrends has worked, a number of these different customers here, we have found that our healthcare customers demand some of the highest levels of uptime. Emergency health records or medical records need to be accessible 24/7 by 365, and data is growing exponentially in a lot of these environments, particularly around medical imaging records. But while other industries may have recovery time objective goals in hours, a lot of our healthcare customers demand RTOs that are being measured by the minute or even in seconds. Then IT professionals need to know that these records, this proprietary information, is fully protected, and that the applications that are leveraging those files can recover in minutes with little to no tolerance for downtime or error. And really, what does downtime represent? Across all verticals, all industry verticals, IT professionals and a lot of the analysts have really coalesced around this figure here, about $9,000 per minute, the average cost of a data center outage. And this figure takes into account lost revenues, lost employee productivity, the costs of recovery, and some of those intangible costs, things such as brand reputation, where an organization that's been impacted by a significant downtime event or data breach is now at the risk of losing their customers or prospects to competitors. In healthcare, these factors certainly all apply, but I think given the importance and the sensitive nature of the patients and the clients that you are serving, this downtime factor, I think, carries significantly more weight. But when we think about business continuity, kind of that traditional view of backup into recovery, we sometimes refer to it here at Unitrends as the old world, sort of stitching together multiple products and solutions to meet the overall goals of business continuity and IT resilience. However, when you're Frankensteining these pieces together, we here at Unitrends really see this as inviting in unnecessary risk into the environment, and you've opened yourself up to what we would consider low-value tasks, day-to-day tuning and management of the systems, potential risks of interoperability. Now you've got multiple user interfaces, multiple support contracts, and budget line items, and ultimately, when a restore isn't working and your hardware manufacturer is pointing fingers at the software vendor or vice versa, how do you get to the root of that issue, resolve that challenge, and ultimately restore those systems? At Unitrends, we strive to deliver our customers a unified experience for their local environment, their off-site environment, with an all-in-one solution for backup and recovery. Hardware, software, and potentially that cloud environment can all be managed through a single interface with a single unified support team backing those users and really supporting all that we do. We strive within our portfolio to offer our customers with the highest levels of data protection, and that starts with local backup and recovery, where our customers have flexibility in how they choose to deploy the solution. We offer a purpose-built hardware appliance equipped with pre-installed and pre-tuned backup software, compute, and memory resources to orchestrate local backup processes, recovery processes, and reporting. And these appliances also are a capacity-based model with internal storage to house backups right on the appliance that are available for immediate recovery. Our appliances range from 2 to 120 terabytes, and they are fully stackable. Now, if you're leveraging, on the other hand, looking to leverage existing server or storage resources, you can also deploy our software as a virtual appliance on top of ESXi, Hyper-V, Zen Hypervisor, even Nutanix AHV. Through replication to a target appliance, whether it be site-to-site or site-to-cloud. We've enabled off-site recovery. We have multiple tools you can archive to cold media or leverage the Unitrends cloud for long-term retention. It is a HIPAA-compliant solution. We're going to talk a little bit more closely about the cloud later on here. And that cloud's been orchestrated or purpose-built for long-term retention and also disaster recovery as a service. This disaster recovery as a service is a no-touch failover process in which mission-critical machines, instances, even an entire data center will be hosted in the Unitrends cloud. And that spin-up, those contracts are written with contractually binding recovery time objective SLAs with fiscal recourse for you, the service subscriber, should we as the provider ever fail to meet the SLA. We have many cases of customers who have successfully failed over to the Unitrends cloud in the event of a disaster to run their mission-critical systems, and our largest spin-up in a true DR event was 18 minutes. It was a fairly resource-intensive ERP server. It took a little bit longer to boot, but still certainly within that 1 hour threshold. So when it comes to where we would fit in your environment, you deploy either that hardware or software locally to protect your local assets. What we would determine an asset is any physical server, virtual machine, instances running on hyper-converged infrastructure, NAS devices, even those cloud-based workloads or instances. You can deploy our software directly through the AWS or the Azure Marketplace to protect those cloud-based instances. Then, to get copies of your data off-site, there's flexibility here as well. You can replicate to a hot target, that's another Unitrends appliance, whether it's hardware, software, or our cloud, or archive off to cold media such as disk, tape, another storage device, even the public clouds we can leverage for archiving there as well. The Unitrends cloud can be leveraged as a target for long-term retention and disaster recovery as a service, just to kind of give folks the idea of that topology, and all of that local backup, off-site recovery, even restorations from a remote appliance can all be managed through that same single pane of glass. We've got a web-based, HTML5-based UI and dashboard. So we did mention briefly those appliances, and I just wanted to expand a little bit on some of the capabilities of that hardware and how we're reducing downtime and some of those common points of failure. The appliances themselves are equipped with self-healing hard drives. It's a technology and machine learning that when a sect within a drive is starting to fail, it will attempt to make corrections and repair itself. If the drive senses that it cannot, it phones home to our South Carolina-based support center. We overnight a replacement drive with instructions on how to hot swap that drive out. Hey, we've gotten indications that the drive in bay 3 is going to fail. Call our 800 number. We're going to walk you through how to hot swap that disk. Since implementing this technology, we've seen a 90% reduction in drive-related support cases. We've also strived to enhance your management experience for the backup and recovery environment with a great deal of automation, and we see this in a couple of places. One of the features that our customers tell us frequently that they love is our SLA policy engine. In a single operational procedure, you group your assets by type. In this example, we're looking at some of our VMware guests within our environment into a policy. Then once established, rather than defining the backup schedule, you're grouping these assets by the recovery point objective, asking ourselves what's the tolerance for data loss on these particular machines, how frequently do we need to be backing them up, and you also can set the window in which those backups will be taken. Also, you can manage the retention of these particular assets backups, whether to include them in replication jobs off-site to any configured hot or cold targets. We leverage what we call our incremental forever strategy, and that the first initial backup will be a full. Incrementals thereon after, and periodically every 10 to 14 days or so, to keep those backup groups and the string of dependents manageable, we superimpose incrementals on top of the full and stitch together new synthetic full points for you. So you're not burdened down with having to take that full regularly. We will create those points for you synthetically. We can leverage our incremental backup types to meet very aggressive recovery point and recovery time objectives. And with that recovery assurance, with our recovery assurance testing, and we're going to be talking about that as well a little bit later on in more detail, we can actually test and spin these backups up in a sandbox environment to benchmark recovery point and recovery time actuals to ensure that these policies are meeting the compliance requirements of your organization. From a local recovery perspective as well, we also have a couple of different tools to meet near zero RTOs. Instant recovery is a process that you can leverage for failed Windows servers, VMware, or Hyper-V guests. Restore them to the original or a different host. This leverages the appliance temporarily as a data store, injects the backup data directly into the virtual disk share that's been exposed. We contact that target host and bring the guest onto production, and we leverage that appliance as our temporary data store. Then leveraging storage vMotion with VMware or live migration with Hyper-V can migrate over that location of the VMDK or the VHD to our target storage location in the background. But our goal here is to be able to recover those guests very, very quickly. Instant recovery powers the restoration of those guests in minutes. You can also leverage instant recovery with our underlying bare metal technology to convert a failed Windows server into a VMware or a Hyper-V guest that can be spun up. We also enable the creation of replicas. They're standby copies of your Windows or VMware assets that are stored on an alternate location. So if you've got multiple hosts or multiple locations, you can store your replicas of one host on another. They're not consuming any compute or memory resources at this time, just the storage amount, and they're going to be updated with every backup. You can choose to store multiple recovery points for these replicas so that you've got multiple recovery points to be able to choose from, and you just boot these into live mode to assume the role of a failed server or a VM. Again, they're very storage efficient. Our customers in some cases will store hundreds, if not thousands, of replicas or replica recovery points to kind of future-proof or safe-proof that environment. Again, it's a best practice to create replicas in advance of needing them, so you may want to choose to create replicas of mission-critical assets before any instance of downtime or an outage. But a couple of ways in which we've enabled near-zero RTOs from recovery, our instant recovery technology, and also the creation of replicas. Now, as mentioned earlier here, recovery assurance is the process that powers our compliance report. And this report can be easily exported from our user interface into a PDF or a CSV, and you can place it in the hands of your director, CIO, compliance officers, etc. There are no additional servers or licensing that's required to run this reporting. It's all included and powered by the appliance. It's testing, again, in a sandbox against specified recovery point and recovery time objectives to benchmark compliance. So again, in addition to the compliance reporting, you can re-IP, reconfigure the CPU and memory of machines, even run application-level scripts to provide you with a level of confidence that far exceeds screenshot verification. And an example of one of our customers who greatly improved their recovery time with Unitrends is Arrowhead Dental Laboratories. They're based down in Utah. And their lab produces custom precision dental restorations, things like implants and crowns. And because they're shipping everything next day delivery, before coming on board with Unitrends, their IT director at the time was under pressure to find a solution that would allow them to easily manage both their physical and virtual workloads with a kind of a unified reporting feature to monitor the status of all of those backups and alert them to any issues that had occurred. They found Unitrends, were able to deploy one of our appliances, leverage some of that scheduling to easily define the backup windows and the recovery point objectives, as well as leveraging that bare metal technology that we talked about earlier to recover. They have an outbound shipping server that was powering that process. It crashed roughly 40 minutes before shipments were due for processing. They leveraged Unitrends bare metal recovery from a clean, tested backup, and were able to restore that server image in under 30 minutes. It's a case study that's online. If the presentation is being made available to folks, or you want to capture that URL there for a moment, you can certainly read into a little bit more detail about how they were able to see the benefits and realize the power of Unitrends here. Ransomware represents significant downtime, and it's a significant threat for any industry, but recognizing that hospitals and doctors need access to their data at all time, cyber criminals are targeting healthcare providers more specifically. And they've even suggested that in some cases you may want to pay the ransom. The FBI has admitted that in some cases that's going to be the only way that you can guarantee or will be able to get your data back. But the demand for these targeted attacks can be in the tens, if not tens of thousands of dollars. So Unitrends' solution here, and just hopefully you haven't seen that screen before here. Just some fast facts here. Healthcare, the #1 cyber attack industry. 45% of all ransomware attacks in 2017 involved healthcare organizations. Again, significant estimates of those damages and what that breach can mean to. And this year, on average, healthcare organizations are falling victim to ransomware attacks on average every 14 seconds. Pretty scary stuff. So while we're by no means a security company, Unitrends does have some hardening that's gone on to our platform, as well as some predictive analytics that help our users respond to ransomware threats or outages. Firstly, we are built from the ground up on a hardened CentOS kernel. It's a Linux-based kernel. We're able to partition and provision out those storage areas or the storage landing zones, and that they are read-only. Ransomware is not able to execute against the file extensions that are residing in our backup storage repositories the same way in some cases that they're able to execute against Windows-based file extensions or Windows-based volumes. We also have a predictive analytics engine that, as you're taking backups of the machines in your environment, will establish baseline patterns of behavior for those assets. Things like change rates, entropy, or the randomness of the data. We've seen ransomware symptomatic of aggressive rewrite activity, large volumes of encryption, ballooning incrementals. When we see patterns of behavior that deviate from the norm, we will identify those machines for you, push out an alert both through the appliance dashboard and through email alerts to identify you of that anomalous activity. You can take steps to quarantine the system, disconnect it from the network, and then leverage the Unitrends appliance and that recovery assurance testing to identify a clean backup point to restore from. Recovery assurance, you can also run, as I had mentioned, those application level scripts to identify any potential issues or shortcomings when trying to restore from your backups. As a result of HIPAA and some other legal mandates, I'm sure as you all know, medical institutions must keep control of their data at all times. The technology, policies, and procedures that are being used to protect electronic protected health information, you have to be able to control the access to it. You ultimately have to know where the data is located at all times of its life cycle, as well as control of who can access it. In addition to role-based access control and AES 256-bit encryption enabled by our local appliances, the Unitrends Cloud has provided our customers with a secure, HIPAA-compliant alternative both to store data for long-term retention and enable that spin-up or the hosting of multiple mission-critical instances. We operate multiple Tier 3 SSAE 18 certified data centers to deliver this service. For a lot of our customers, it's been very straightforward in how they choose to adopt the cloud. It's a straightforward licensing model. There are no fees for data transfer or egress. We're just interested in how much data are you looking to replicate to our cloud before dedupe and compression. We license that in 500 gigabyte increments. You select the retention policy required from 90 days, 1 to 7 years, or infinite. We'll store those backups for you on a grandfather, father, son rotation or GFS rotation, and on top of that you can elect to add in that disaster recovery as a service. This slide I know is a little bit of a busy one, kind of an eyesore here, but when we talk about that DRAS service and some of the consulting that goes into it, this is just a snapshot of what that engagement looks like. We're working through with our customers to identify protected systems, boot order dependencies, networking configurations, the application level acceptance tests that you want to see. We'll continue to run those tests for our customers regularly, send you those compliance and the application results there. So in essence, we understand what the environment needs to look like when we fail over. We test that failover so that when you get that phone call and you're declaring a DR event, again, a no-touch process for you, the user, outside of that phone call, we've fully tested and vetted the data that's being backed up in our environment. We understand that we're going to be able to recover those systems and be able to meet those RTOs. There are 3 levels of this service based on the recovery time objective, again, contractually guaranteed, premium, elite, and standard, 1 hour, 24 hours, and best effort. Any of these levels of DRAS can be licensed on a per-instance basis. You can also license standard against the entire replicated volume, and that any machine that needs to be brought up, whether it be a large set of VMs or your entire data center environment, would be eligible for spin up there. Another customer of ours that's been able to greatly achieve that HIPAA compliance with Unitrends and also solidify their disaster recovery strategy was Floyd Medical Center. They're a nonprofit acute care hospital serving patients on the Georgia and Alabama state line. And in the process of a data center migration, Floyd realized that their existing solution was struggling with scale and it wasn't able to support a growing virtual environment nor meet the mandates for their HIPAA compliance. And after a rigorous evaluation process against the likes of Commvault, Floyd selected to deploy Unitrends at their primary location and their secondary data center. The solution has enabled them to quickly recover their virtual machines, physical servers, files from backup stored either on the primary appliance or at their secondary site. And that secondary site is where they're also leveraging the appliance landing space, that storage on the box, to encrypt and store backup copies long-term. With the ability to scale to the Unitrends cloud or leverage our partnership with one of the public cloud providers such as AWS, the center was confident in future-proofing their backup environment so that when they're ready to look for other ways to store data in the cloud or meet long-term compliance needs, they'll be ready to do so. I know I'm tight on time here, David. I apologize. I'll keep moving quickly here, but we also understand, as we mentioned earlier, that healthcare supports a large community of users who are not business continuity or IT experts. Again, those doctors, nurses, the administrative staff, they carry that risk of clicking on dangerous links, deleting or losing files that they may need in the future. And with all records being mission critical, we need to be able to recover those quickly. With our intuitive user interface, even an untrained IT staff can easily find individual files from backups. You can leverage our search file functionality where you can search by file name, extension type with wildcards supported, even date ranges. But complementing a growing environment, we've also made strides to support data that's no longer lives in your data center. For organizations that have moved to Office 365, for example, we offer a cloud-to-cloud backup service that's called spanning. It fills in gaps along that shared responsibility model when subscribing to that service. Ultimately, the data that's living within those applications is still the IP and the responsibility of the organization subscribed to the service. Microsoft will guarantee application availability, fault tolerance, hardware redundancy, but they're not doing a lot to protect your data. With spanning, you can schedule on-demand or regularly scheduled backups to capture all of that information that exists within the O365 tenant. You get infinite retention of these backup copies, self-service recovery, some neat functionality such as cross-user restore, and it's unlimited storage, so it's a straightforward per-user, per-month subscription. Again, really designed to fill in some of those gaps with the shared responsibility model that SaaS providers maintain. We also are close to reaching a tipping point, and the industry analysts estimate that by as early as 2020, as soon as next year, we'll be creating as much or more intellectual property outside of the traditional data center than inside of it. So protect your mobile users and endpoint devices, your road warriors, and more so, we have a direct-to-cloud backup agent to help protect those Windows endpoints. It's an enhanced or a hardened version of our file-level agent to back up those workstations. There's no appliance necessary. The agent is linked right with a cloud target or an instance of Unitrends in our cloud location. When we talk about the hardening of that agent, it's suitable and it understands that these endpoints may not always have regular access to Wi-Fi or be connected to the internet. We don't want hanging backup jobs or errors there. It's expected and been hardened to respond to those situations. You're enabled with self-service recovery, a cloud-based user interface, all for a straightforward per-user, per-month charge. So again, you can even authorized users with that role-based access control, that if a particular professional needs to be able to go in and access the backups of his PC, he can restore those files or folders back down to his PC or another device that has the Unitrends agent installed on it. It can be self-service. It's enabled with multi-tenancy as well if IT bills other departments for goods and services here. So, with that, I hopefully have been able to showcase for folks here how Unitrends can be that all-in-one vendor approach for local backup, off-site recovery, long-term data retention, even that disaster recovery as a service. With a great deal of the automation that we've built into the product, we aim to make it minimal work and minimal burden on your staff. You rack connect it, and you're ready to go. Everything that we're doing, both locally and in the cloud, is being certified by recovery assurance, application-level tests, compliance tests. We talked about the security of the platform, the hardened Linux, the proactive or anomalous threat detection, and again, should anything go wrong, any bumps you encounter along the way, you're being backed by that customer support group right here in the U.S., 24/7 by 365, and they're actually co-load with our research and development group. So an engineer gets on, he hasn't seen this error before, he's able to hop right across the hall to the individuals that wrote the code. So David, I appreciate it. I apologize if I ran a couple of minutes long here, but I do have up on the last slide here some resources here for the audience. If you'd be interested in getting in touch with Unitrends, you can leverage our toll-free sales line there, as well as our company contact information. If you'd like to see the interface, feel free to request a live demo with one of our solutions engineers. And you can also keep an eye on unitrends.com/events for all of our upcoming virtual and in-market events later this year. It was a pleasure to be able to speak to everyone this afternoon. Hopefully, was able to should be able to share something with you about Unitrends here. And David, I'll turn it back over to you at this point to see if there are any questions on the line here.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Adam. Always fun, always exciting to have you on. I love your fast-paced presentations. I always learn a lot. I hope the audience did too. So I popped up a poll question for everyone out there in the audience. It says, what additional information would you like about the Unitrends solution? And I'll just leave that up while we do just a few questions here, because I know, like you said, we're running a little low on time. First one, I know that Unitrends offers a number of different backup solutions. You have the hardware appliance on site. You have the software-based solution. How do people select from the different options?
So typically, we'll be working through with the customer to understand what's going to be the right fit for their environment. Do you have adequate secondary storage to land backup copies? We don't want to be leveraging backup storage. The appliance is also a capacity-based licensing model, so there are no per VM, per socket, per agent fees. Whatever you can fit on the box, you're eligible to back up, and you have access to really an unlimited number of agents that you would require. So in a lot of cases, we just want to find for customers the right balance of feature, function, and cost for their environment. There's no one best fit, I would say. So again, we work through closely with folks. We have some additional tools that our sales and solutions engineers can do to conduct scans of the environment, identify assets, really get an accurate size of the data set, try and understand those typical change rates, growth rates, so that we can size out the appliances for growth, or a little bit more flexibility with the virtual appliance where you have the benefit of being able to attach potentially cheaper or low-cost storage there.
Yeah, that's great to have a number of different options, because I'm sure, healthcare organizations are going to range from, massive hospitals to like a small chain of doctors' offices, type thing, and they're going to have different needs. When it comes to the appliance, this person who asked the question here, they're curious about the scalability of it. I mean, backup data just seems to never stop growing. So when the appliance starts to become, fully utilized, what do you do after that?
So we do have, and just so they know, we do have global inline deduplication and compression, so we're very efficient with the data that we're backing up. We've seen data reduction ratios as high as 20-to-1, but the appliances are fully stackable. We are working, and probably in the next 6 months or so, you will see a line that will be able to scale out kind of elastically with a software-defined storage volume. Today, though, they are fully stackable, so if was a case where we're running out of capacity on the appliance. We could look at where potentially we could purge or archive some of that data off to a cheaper storage medium. We could look at adding in a secondary appliance for the environment or new assets in the environment, or we could look at sizing into a larger appliance and potentially replacing the role of that existing appliance as more of an archive target, or setting that up at a secondary site to enable DR. A few different ways in which we could handle that, but typically we are sizing through and work closely with our customers to make sure that they've got adequate growth on the appliance for typically anywhere from 3 to 7 years, depending on their needs and kind of their refresh cycle.
Excellent, excellent. And that's one of the things I've learned about Unitrends, having you all on past events, is you have an option for just about any use case, including, for example, you mentioned the spanning backup with Office 365 data protection. So you've got all the bases covered for data protection. Adam, I think that's all the time we have for our live Q&A, but it's been great having you on the event today. Thank you.
Excellent, David. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
For more information on Unitrends, check out the handout that's available for download right there in your audience console on the Handouts tab. And with that, it's time for our next presentation on today's Healthcare EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Tapan Mehta, Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences Solutions Marketing at Nutanix. Tapan, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks for being on the event. Take it away.
Thank you, David. Good morning, good afternoon, folks. Excited to be here. Quick rapid-fire discussion presentation. In terms of the agenda, what I have really is 3 key areas that I want to emphasize as part of the next 20 minutes. 1, who we are as an organization. Number 2, how do we enable healthcare organizations to drive different workloads, whether they be clinical or IT? And the last piece is what specifically in terms of healthcare solutions we have that make that journey feasible for healthcare customers. So as an organization, not sure how many of the attendees online know about Nutanix, but we are a relatively young company, have been around for about 10 years, in fact, coming up on our 10-year anniversary in a couple of months. We have about 5,000 employees worldwide, and we were really the pioneers of defining hyperconverged infrastructure, which I'll talk about in a minute. And as part of being the pioneers in that space, we lead the Magic Quadrant in Gartner, as well as having a pretty sizable footprint in the overall market. One of the big things that we like to emphasize for our customers is our Net Promoter Score, which you see over here has been over 90 for the last 5 years. And to put that in perspective, the industry average is in low 30s. So we emphasize and spend a lot of our time and effort around making sure that our customers continue to partner with us and are there for the long haul. In terms of our customers, we have a global footprint, a little over 13,000 customers, and that number continues to increase on a quarterly basis. Speaking about healthcare customers, we have over 1,200 healthcare customers. You see some of the customers outlined over here, and this really spreads the entire spectrum of the healthcare continuum, whether they're healthcare providers, whether they're payers, pharma companies, medical device manufacturer companies, and we are seeing increasing adoption among the healthcare customers throughout these 4 different subsegments. And in fact, healthcare is one of our fastest growing segments, speaking to a lot about where the market is and what are some of the underlying drivers in the market. As I mentioned earlier, what do we do? We are really in the business of helping customers designing and modernizing their data centers. And this comes from whether they're running their applications on-prem or they have their applications running in a fully public cloud, or having in a hybrid model where you have some applications running on-prem and having some other applications running in a public cloud environment. Whether it's disaster recovery, remote office, branch office, IoT as it relates to edge computing, all these different scenarios where a customer is tasked on a day-to-day basis, especially in a healthcare setup where, for example, disaster recovery is a very important thing because you cannot be in a situation where your system goes down and you have no means of accessing patient records. So this is something we really enable our healthcare customers throughout their journey and in different workloads. And looking at how we make this feasible, it's to really leverage the Nutanix software in unifying whether it's private or public or a distributed cloud. And if you look at a typical data center that is being designed today, you have multiple different areas where a customer is tasked and looking at from a technology standpoint. You have the compute, the storage, virtualization network, and then running different applications or the virtualization stack, software stack on these hardware configuration. The challenge is, looking at all these different components and piecing the pieces of the puzzle together and having a very unified way of deploying the applications. And that's something that Nutanix software really simplifies for the customer and how they could go about doing it. And this is where hyperconverged infrastructure comes in. I mentioned earlier we were the pioneers of HCI, or hyperconverged infrastructure. It's been around for 10 years, and there are two main components as it relates to HCI. One is looking at a distributed data plane, which is in essence really consolidating all the different hardware components of storage, network, compute, and then being able to run the virtualization stack on it. The second aspect of the hyperconverged infrastructure is really the management plane. How do you control all these different pieces that make up a typical data center? And the idea is to really have a unified single pane of glass whereby you can control the different components, whether you want to run different VMs, looking at the compute processing needs, looking at the storage requirements. All of that can be controlled via this single pane of glass. So our value proposition is really around enabling customers in a multi-cloud, multi-workload environment, running any applications. We are hardware agnostic, so it doesn't matter where you run Nutanix software on Lenovo, on HPE, on Fujitsu, Dell, EMC, Cisco, it doesn't matter. And running applications or software that are cloud native. And also giving customers the flexibility of migrating the workloads between clouds. I mentioned earlier moving between private or public, or having a hybrid cloud model, which is the trend that we are seeing more and more in the industry, especially in the healthcare space. And the second aspect related to the control part, being able to have a one-click multi-cloud management and being able to use the tools to run the environment. So in a nutshell, that's what we do as a organization. That's what our technology does. And really shifting gears, how does all these technologies and where does Nutanix really fit into the healthcare ecosystem? And as covered earlier in the presentation on this webinar, healthcare is at a very interesting crossroads. There are numerous challenges that the industry faces, everything around data analytics, really looking at how can healthcare organizations drive meaningful insight from all this data that is being generated, whether it's wearables or different IoT-based sensors out there in the market, looking the whole idea around consumerism of health and and making sure that consumers or the patients have easy way of accessing their healthcare records, managing the population health management, as well as a lot of healthcare organizations are moving on a digital enterprise. And by digital enterprise, I mean really looking at providing easy and better ways for a patient to receive care, access care, and doing so in a very operationally effective manner. And last but not the least, healthcare and security go hand in hand, and this is something that is of utmost importance in the healthcare space as it relates to patient privacy and data security. So a lot of challenges, but that's what also makes me very excited given the important role that technology has to play in the healthcare space. And this is where, from a Nutanix standpoint, there are two key areas that we really focus on. One, from a workload standpoint. One is around the core clinical application, and I'll speak about that in a moment. And the other is around the imaging aspects, given a lot of imaging applications are today all digitized, and how do you enable healthcare organizations to have these two key critical clinical workloads run in an optimal way, whether it's in performance, whether it's in access, or making sure that patient privacy and data security can be maintained when using these applications. Above and beyond these two key clinical workloads, we also play a major role in a lot of other business critical applications. For example, SAP HANA or Oracle, virtualization services, VDI being one of the examples that gets used predominantly in healthcare space. Remote office, branch office, given the nature of the healthcare space, you have a lot of ambulatory or outpatient services available. You have AI, ML application security, big data analytics, and end user computing. So all these critical business applications are just as important as the other clinical workloads that we really run in. So looking at specifically from a healthcare standpoint, from healthcare applications, where does Nutanix fit in? Where do our customers really typically use us? I mean, you start from top in terms of the software stack and looking at the delivery of the applications at the point of care. We partner with Citrix and VMware to deliver those applications. But from a core clinical workload standpoint, as well as looking at all the operational aspect of clinical workloads, the likes of Epic, Meditech, Cerner, eClinicalWorks are just some of the examples where these EMRs are running on the Nutanix platform. From an imaging standpoint, which I mentioned earlier, is another important area where Nutanix plays in. We partner with a very broad spectrum of PACS VNA partners, some of which are listed over here: IBM Watson Health, Fujifilm, or Change Healthcare. And integration, a very important aspect. How do you take all these different clinical workloads? How do you integrate them with the other critical business applications, whether it's Imprivata or from Doctor First, or the other workloads where we will optimize them to run on the environment. And the underlying platform for all of these different applications, we have to make sure from a security standpoint, from 24/7 availability, computing, block services or file services, all those capabilities are available and robust on the Nutanix platform. There are a lot more details around the specific aspects of how all these applications are integrated, how they're optimized to run on the Nutanix platform. But the idea is, from a single snapshot view, this is kind of the crux of the matter, how Nutanix enables different workloads to run on the Nutanix platform. A few months ago, I would say, in fact, about 2 or 3 months ago, our latest addition to the healthcare portfolio, if you may, was the addition of Meditech Expanse, the entire Meditech stack being able to run or optimize on the Nutanix HCI platform. So if you are a listener on the webinar today, you are a Meditech user, you now have the option of being able to run this EMR on the Nutanix HCI platform. So we're pretty excited about it. I'm working very closely with Meditech on making this possible. Besides Meditech, we also have numerous other applications that we run. Epic, as we all know, is one of the other major players in the market. We are optimized to run the Epic Hyperspace. In fact, we have a large number of customers running Epic Hyperspace on Nutanix. In addition to Hyperspace, the Epic databases of Cache and Cogito are also being run on Nutanix platform, and we continue to see remarkable performance improvement from customers running all these different Epic applications on Nutanix platform. Chipsoft is another one that we see that has been optimized and certified to run on the Nutanix platform. And the other one that I want to highlight is EcoCast, which has been validated to run on the Nutanix platform. The full stack EcoCast is now in production. So again, these are some of the key EHR, EMR partners where we have worked very closely with in driving these workloads, which we all know are compute hungry, performance hungry, but making them run even better on the Nutanix platform. Mentioned earlier, another big area is around PACS and VNA. This is just a sample screenshot of the different PACS VNA running on Nutanix platform. There are many more that we continue to work. Also from IBM Watson, a pretty broad spectrum of their applications are running on Nutanix. Same thing with Infinite Healthcare, Change, and Fujifilm. There's a lot more information available on our website that goes to the specific applications among these different PACS VNA partners that we work very closely with. I mentioned earlier at the start of the presentation, we have over 1,200 healthcare customers, and that number continues to increase on a quarterly basis. Here's just one example of a customer. This is a small regional hospital. I shouldn't say small. It's about 400-bed hospital outside of Baltimore. And one of their big challenges was really looking at, driving and improving patient outcomes, at the same time making sure that the organization can leverage their existing IT investment and their IT resources. They are a big Epic shop. They use Epic Hyperspace. They also use Epic Cogito that I mentioned earlier. And one of the big challenges that they were running into is to constantly upgrading. As we all know, every quarter they have to upgrade the Epic EMR. But the challenge was to doing so in a much more effective manner. And by transitioning over to Nutanix, they were not only able to harness the advantages of the Nutanix software, leveraging the HCI infrastructure platform, whereby they were able to consolidate all their compute, network, storage, and virtualization need into a single platform. But what they really saw was some significant benefits. To give you some perspective, their nightly ETL would typically take them about 4.5 hours per cycle. Once they transition that to the Nutanix platform, that time went from 4.5 hours to less than 45 minutes. So they were really be able to drive a lot more efficiency, both from an operational standpoint as well as seeing a performance from response time that their Epic environment was running in their organization. And this led to improved staff productivity, where now the IT organization is viewed more as a business partner versus a R&D cost center for the organization. So like Anne Arundel Medical Center, we have several other healthcare customers who continue to see the benefits of leveraging and running clinical and other business critical applications on the Nutanix platform. So to really kind of summarize, when you look at the Nutanix platform as it relates to healthcare IT, our main objective is to really simplify the operations for the IT organizations and really enabling them to focus on better patient outcomes and clinician productivity. The typical journey that a customer partners with Nutanix is really starting off around the HCI platform, Anne Arundel being an example, really looking at very specific clinical and IT workloads. Once they have are familiar with our platform, then moving a step further up, which is looking at moving some of those applications from on-prem to either a hybrid cloud environment or a public cloud environment. And this is where final phase kind of comes in for a lot of the healthcare organization, is being in a position to run multi-workloads in a multi-cloud environment. And we're starting to see more and more of that in the healthcare space, where healthcare customers want to have the flexibility and the freedom to run the applications either on-prem or in cloud, or ideally more so in a hybrid environment. And that's where we see more and more healthcare customers having that hybrid environment flexibility and being able to run the different applications. There's a lot more information available on our website. If you go to nutanix.com/healthcare, you can find everything from different case studies to different architectural documents, as well as very specific content and assets that will give you a deeper and a broader perspective of how we enable healthcare customers along this journey of providing better care for patients, driving better outcomes, as well as doing it at a manner which is operationally much more cost-effective. That's all I had. Hopefully, I'd give you an idea of who we are as an organization, how do we enable healthcare customers to drive different workloads in the environment, and what are some of the specific products and solutions that we provide for our healthcare customers. And at this point, David, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the audience may have for me.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Tapan. We do have some questions here for you from the audience. While we do that, I'm going to bring up this poll question. We'll just leave this up on the screen. What additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? So I'll call everyone's attention to that poll question. Let's see. First question that came in, and if you have a question about Nutanix and healthcare, now is the time to ask it. Now is the time to get it answered. First question that came in, they're asking, why do you think hyperconverged infrastructure is a good fit for healthcare?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we did a webinar with one of our customers, and this is a pretty common underlying theme. The couple of reasons that customers really look at hyperconverged infrastructure. One is around simplicity. Really having the capability to simplify the operations, being able to consolidate all the different platforms of compute, network, and storage into a single platform, and being able to run that on through a single pane of glass, which is really make it easier for customers to see where the critical bottlenecks might be in the environment and being able to quickly address those. So that's, I would say, by far has been one of the big reasons around simplicity. The second one has been around the ease of use and being able to use the platform and being able to run different workloads, whether they're clinical workloads or other IT workloads, and seeing the significant performance improvement via these workloads running on Nutanix platform. And that's been a common theme across our healthcare customers, and that's been one of the underlying reasons of why we are seeing increased adoption in the market space.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, that efficiency, I'm sure, I mean, every company out there loves that, but especially in healthcare. Here's a question. Adam is asking, are there ways to combat aging hardware with a Nutanix solution? Do you have any suggestions on that?
I think there are different options that are available. As I mentioned earlier, we are hardware agnostic. So if you have legacy infrastructure in your environment, you can still run Nutanix software on those platforms. And we have a lot of partners that we work with, as I mentioned earlier, HPE, Lenovo, Fujitsu, Dell EMC, Cisco. Any of these different hardware platforms can easily run on Nutanix platform. We also provide a TCO ROI model for our customers. In fact, if you go to our website, there's a tool called Sizer, where you can take your existing infrastructure parameters and requirements and map it into the Sizer, and it will tell you the type of configuration you would need within Nutanix. So we have a path for customers to migrate from the legacy infrastructure should they decide to go down a hyperconverged infrastructure path.
Okay, nice. And then another question here. Let's see, actually a comment. John said, we are a Nutanix AHV shop and we really like it. Arash said, great presentation. I'm checking out the website to learn more about Nutanix Healthcare. Another question here. What do you think is the next big thing for the healthcare industry from a technology perspective?
I think there are several key underlying trends going in the market. One is, I think the big emphasis from my standpoint is going to be around the delivery of healthcare, and that's something that the industry has grappled for years. We have great technologies from great companies out there, whether it's in the space of cloud and storage and network and compute, but the challenge really has been how do you take all these different components and stitch it together in a manner that can really drive better outcomes at the point of care. So while we have, the hot, sexy buzzwords around AI and machine learning, while that all is good, and I think that is going to make a difference in the healthcare market, I think there are some low underlying areas that need to be addressed very quickly, and operational efficiency is one example. IoT-based capabilities is another area. So it's a lot of different things kind of happening in the market space. I think what I would emphasize to the audience is to really look at the end of the day, how technology can really make the life of your stakeholders as an IT organization, your clinicians, your doctors, your nurses, to embrace technology. And the only way they will really do that is if we can simplify and make it easier for them to use technology. Because as good as technology is, or as great as technology is, if it's not intuitive enough for the audience that we're trying to serve, then that adoption will have major hurdles to overcome. So that would be, again, I can go at length on this, but there are a lot of different areas around in the healthcare space around IoT, AI, ML, cloud, I think, is going to be key over the next 12 to 18 months.
Very cool. Very insightful. Looks like that's all the time we have in our live Q&A. I think we covered all the questions that came in for now, but a really great presentation. Topham, thank you so much for being on the event today.
My pleasure. Thank you, David.
For more information on Nutanix, check out the Handouts tab there in the audience console. There is a PDF download there for you. Also, check out nutanix.com/healthcare, the link that was shown there in the slides. And now it's time for our first prize giveaway. We have a Microsoft Surface Pro going to Jackie Haag, not sure how you pronounce it, but Jackie from Michigan. Congratulations to Jackie from Michigan. You won the first Microsoft Surface Pro on today's event. If you were not Jackie from Michigan, stay tuned. We've got another prize giveaway coming up here in just a little bit, so stay tuned for that. And now it's time to introduce our next presenter on the Healthcare EcoCast. That is Mr. Vikram Bellaprakar, Product and Solutions Marketing at Pivot3. Vikram, are you with us?
Yes, David, thank you. Can you hear me well?
I can, yeah. Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Thank you. So good morning and good afternoon, folks. As David mentioned, my name is Vikram Bellaprakar. I do solutions marketing, specifically data center solutions marketing for Pivot3. And so for today's presentation, I would like to introduce you to Pivot3's hyperconverged infrastructure architecture and discuss how that platform could be really used effectively as a consolidation platform, including for virtual desktops in the healthcare space. All right, so just a quick introduction to Pivot3. So we're known as, recognized as leader in hyperconverged infrastructure. We actually started shipping hyperconverged infrastructure systems back in 2008. So we were one of the first vendors to actually have a hyperconverged offering on the market. Back then, we focused on a very demanding use case, a storage-intensive use case of mission-critical video surveillance. Since then, we have expanded our use cases and support for more wide-ranging data center use cases. And now we have more than 20,000 deployments across many different countries and continents. We are recognized by analysts like Gartner and Forrester as a top-tier provider of HCI, hyperconverged infrastructure. We have several innovations in the area of storage management, but I want to talk a little bit about the performance, scale, and efficiency, the last bullet there. We're known in market for providing high-performance solutions, right? So the way we utilize high-performance resources, we're able to provide better latency, better response times, better transactional performance. From the scale standpoint, some of the largest HCI systems deployed today are on Pivot3. Routinely, you would find Pivot3 HCI cluster supporting more than 10 petabytes of data in a deployment. And these systems are also at that large scale very easy to manage. And from efficiency standpoint, our architecture delivers market-leading densities in terms of VMs that could be supported on nodes. That means less hardware, as well as the way we do storage management. We're able to provide a lot better usable capacity, minimizing your storage requirements also. Right. So here, this slide quickly talks about what is hyperconverged infrastructure and how it is different from the traditional way of doing IT, which is shown on the left-hand side. So what you see on the left-hand side, really this architecture, it has had discrete silos for compute and for storage, and they are stitched together using storage networking. So this architecture actually came about much before virtualization was a reality and a mainstream phenomenon in data center, right? So this architecture came about when it was mostly about physical workloads. Dual controller storage systems were optimal for that. But really, you start thinking about today's highly dense environments where either VDI or the consolidated cloud environments, which are characterized by high density of VMs, right? So many VMs sharing hardware, sharing compute hardware as well as storage. This architecture was not designed for that reality, and it creates a fundamental resource bottleneck in this kind of highly dense environment. So customers, many of the users are moving from that traditional way of doing IT to hyper-converged infrastructure, what you see on the right-hand side. There, essentially, we're using industry standard Intel x86 architecture server nodes and using software to do all of the resource aggregation and to provide those resources to applications above the infrastructure. Users are seeing, this sort of architecture improves the agility, the way IT can respond to changing business needs. It improves the agility. It improves operational efficiency because of use of industry standard technologies. And it's a modular platform based on standards. But I think more fundamentally, because this architecture relies on software for a lot of data management activities, you have opportunities to use policy-based intelligence and policy-based automation in this platform. So what we at Pivot 3 are doing really is focusing on that piece where how we can use policies and intelligence to automate some of these infrastructure management processes or workflows that are very common and cumbersome in many of the organizations. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. So this intelligence, this shows, the Pivot 3 architecture is really governed and managed by this, policy-based intelligence engine. An intelligence engine, really, what you see on the right-hand side, the parameters that it manages. Through intelligence engine, you can have intelligent policies that will, on the fly, behind the scene, manage the performance of your workloads, that can ensure the right security policies are applied to the right data volumes and data sets. From data protection standpoint, how we handle fault tolerance or how we handle backup and replication activities. From data management standpoint, how do you manage your assets across various different clusters, whether they're on-prem assets or assets in the cloud? How do you manage those? From a monitoring and analytics standpoint, the proactive diagnostics. So all of these areas are really managed by the policy-based intelligence engine that Pivot 3 offers. Right, so now really getting into the architecture, what you see here on the left-hand side is the foundation on which Pivot 3 is built, distributed scale-out architecture. So what you see there are 5 industry standard server nodes. Pivot 3 software, Pivot 3 HCI software is running on those nodes, and really it's that software that aggregates all of those resources and creates the sort of environment that can support highly dense, IT environments and workloads. So just from the storage standpoint here, we have 5 nodes. Let's assume, these days each of these nodes have 16 SCADA-controlled drives. So we are looking at 80 drives in this 5-node cluster. Really, Pivot 3 aggregates all of these drives across all of these nodes, and so every single volume you create will cut across all of these drives. Every single VM that you will deploy will utilize all of these drives and the collective I/O horsepower that these drives provide. Right, so this is the sort of architecture you need, where you have many drives pooling together to provide that I/O performance. When you're thinking about today's virtualized or cloud deployments or VDI deployments, that are their fundamental characteristic is their density, number of workloads or VMs supported on shared hardware. And so that, I think, on that foundation, it's a critical foundation for this kind of highly dense workload, and that's the foundation on which Pivot 3 is built. On top of that, what you see on the right-hand side, because we can aggregate all of those resources, we can implement our advanced erasure coding in order to provide fault tolerance. Now, this is something that comes in play when you have failures in your cluster, right? So systems have failures, drives fail, sometimes nodes fail. How do you protect against those sorts of failures? So we use erasure coding to do that. And you'll see on the right-hand side, you'll see that graph, orange color graph, that's the sort of usable capacity that we can provide with erasure coding while ensuring fault tolerance. And so what you see, the 2 parallel lines below that is what really most other HCI vendors are doing in order to provide that redundancy and fault tolerance. They're relying on cross-node replication. So they're keeping 2 or 3 copies of the data distributed across multiple nodes. And thus, the sort of capacity efficiency or usable capacity that they're able to provide is much lower. And so we can provide higher usable capacity. We can provide, enterprise-grade fault tolerance. But I think in the process, what we are also doing is we are minimizing the performance impact of this fault tolerance. In a 2-way or 3-way replication, you're really essentially multiplying your write IOs. So for every write IO, you're writing that 2 or 3 times. And that's stealing those IOs away from the workloads, essentially. In our case, that's not happening. There's a minimal write IO penalty in our case, and thus the performance that you can recognize out of this system is also greater. So all of those things, the distributed architecture, this erasure coding way of doing fault tolerance, and what you see, this multi-tier architecture here, all of those factors play together to provide a platform that can handle highly dense environments and that can really handle those environments on a smaller hardware footprint. So here you see inside the box, just from the storage standpoint, there are various different storage resources that our software aggregates and manages very actively. You see some of the RAM is carved out as cache. Some NVMe resources are also utilized, as well as SCADA control SSD and hard disk drives are utilized. Now, these resources are managed by our quality of service very actively, meaning users can define the policies, and based on those policies and based on the access patterns for those data sets and applications, system will decide in real time which applications or which workloads or which data sets can utilize which storage tier. And thus, we can optimize the performance coming out of this. One, and secondly, we can remove the resource bottleneck. Usually, it's I/O bottleneck that dictates infrastructure footprint. We can remove that by intelligently using all of these resources at appropriate time for appropriate priority. And thus, removing that bottleneck means that you'll need less hardware. Typically, you will see, many of the deployments to support an equivalent workload, whether it's a VDI workload or a mixed workload, sort of workload. We're able to provide, with our solution, the hardware footprint is about 30 to 40% less. So that's a substantial difference in the amount of hardware you have to deploy to support those workloads, and that really translates directly in the total cost of ownership. So now here it shows, how these policies can be utilized to prioritize your different workloads. So you may have, different workloads, including VDI, in your environment, and these workloads have different business criticality as well as different performance requirements. So you see here, you have a production database, you have a virtual desktop environment, and you have a development database. So all of these applications have different requirements and different criticality. And so based on the criticality and a performance requirement, you can tag them to one of the 5 policies that are predefined in our platform. So OrderDB being the most important is tagged at policy 1, whereas the VDI is tagged at policy 3, a business critical policy, and the DevDB is tagged at policy 5, which is a non-critical policy. And these policies will govern IOPS. This will govern the throughput as well as the latency that these data sets are able to experience. And so in an event that you want to change these policies, a workload you expect that workload to require higher performance, you can easily change those policies. For example, this VDI workload can be easily changed from policy 3 to policy 2 if you're anticipating higher I/O requirements from that workload. So very easy to prioritize your workloads based on the business policies, and very easy to change them on the fly and real time if needed. So now what happens with this is, with this architecture, you have workloads tagged at different policies, and system really monitors it real time, and it prioritizes resources based on their criticality. In this case, the production database was requiring more resources, and system recognized that in real time and throttled the appropriate workload in order to provide the resources to the most important workload, in this case, the order database. So this is something that happens on the fly based on the policies. But this is also what I want to point out is this is not a reservation-based quality of service. We are not reserving resources for these workloads. We are really prioritizing these resources. That means, if the higher priority workload, let's say order database, at say off work hours is not driving any transactions, those resources would easily be provisioned to another workload, a tier 2 workload, in this case VDI. And thus, you're not reserving or blocking those resources. You're using them very intelligently, and you can eliminate resource bottleneck, reduce hardware footprint as a result of this. All right. So from security standpoint, I think security is an important aspect in healthcare. From security standpoint, our platform offers built-in encryption out of the box. This encryption that we offer is extremely differentiated in the way it's implemented. So first of all, when we implemented this encryption, we integrated with Intel's APIs in order to do that. And as a result, we are able to provide this encryption with next to no performance impact. There is absolutely no performance overhead with our encryption. With most encryptions, other software-based encryptions, you will see there's a large overhead in performance. So you have to make a trade-off between performance and security. But the way we are using these APIs, we are able to overcome that limitation, so you can secure your data sets while also ensuring the performance is not compromised. We do support standards-based key management, KMIP standards, and there are many key management vendors that work with our system. So you have a choice to select that. And so for more advanced use cases, like, for example, multi-tenancy or geofencing, or you need VM-level encryptions, we work very closely with a security partner called HITrust. We collaborate with them on engineering and testing our solutions to make sure they work properly and there is no performance overhead of our solutions working together. So from security standpoint, you have native features that can satisfy most needs. For more stringent security needs, we can work with our partner ecosystem. Now, scale, I think, is one of the ways areas in which most deployments struggle, right? So you can deploy a system, but when it comes time to scale, that's when the pain starts. As the scale grows, you usually have performance degradation, management complexity grow exponentially, and so we can handle those scaling situations by offering these flexible alternatives, flexible options for scaling. So first of all, our nodes are available in a wide variety of resource configuration. You have 1U or 2U form factor to choose from. For RAM, you can choose a wide range of RAM configurations, a wide range of CPU configuration, all the way from 4 cores, really small, tiny deployment, to 40 core in one single box. You also can choose various different NVMe configurations. You have hybrid as well as flash nodes. You have we support GPUs, NVIDIA's Tesla as well as NVIDIA's M10, both GPUs we support. We have storage optimized node and compute optimized node, and that really allows you to scale in a way that makes sense to you. You can scale your system to address a specific bottleneck. So if you have a bottleneck where you're trying to just add compute, as in CPU and RAM, you have compute optimized nodes to use there. In a situation where you do not need to add more compute because your workloads are not growing, but the data that you're retaining is growing over time, you can use storage optimized node. And by doing so, you optimize the cost of scaling. You address the specific bottleneck and you scale in those specific form factors, and thus reduce the total cost of scaling. So I just want to show an example where this sort of mixed the storage optimized nodes or compute optimized nodes or mixing flash and hybrid clusters would be useful. So here you see a 3-node cluster supporting certain workloads. Let's say that they're mixed workloads. Part of it is VDI. In most of the situation for Pivot 3 deployment, what happens is, because of the way we manage our I/O or our data path so stringently, we're usually able to, most often our bottleneck is not in the I/O data path. It's usually in the CPU and RAM. So if you want to add a few users to your VDI deployment, or you want to add more applications to this cluster, you can just scale using compute nodes, right? In this case, you're not adding storage, but you're just adding compute nodes. And the key here is that above the hypervisor, you're managing it as one cluster, and below the hypervisor, you just have the storage from the first initial deployment that you deployed. So in this manner, you can reduce your scaling expenses. There may be situations where you would want to add hybrid node to a flash cluster, hybrid nodes to flash clusters. Let's say a situation where you have long-term data retention requirement, and that data doesn't really have a high performance requirement. In that case, you can add storage. You can add hybrid nodes to your flash cluster, and thus reduce the total cost while still servicing all your workloads and ensuring all of their service levels are met. From scaling to a large scale, you think of this as a pod-like scaling, right? You can scale linearly. In our case, you can add nodes on the fly, and the system scales non-disruptively. Behind the scene, all of the resources are reaggregated as you add more nodes to the cluster. So all of these nodes can be thought of as pods, and these pods, many of these pods can be managed as one domain. So in this case, you have multiple. You have multiple of these pods. They may be located across different geographies, different locations, but you can logically lump them together as one domain, and you can manage them as one system from one user interface. And I think in many of the situations, that's the case. Many of our customers have multiple data centers in different locations, partly to ensure redundancy, but they want to be able to manage that as a simple one infrastructure, and they can do that so with Pivot 3's single pane of glass management. From the VDI standpoint, we have been supporting VDI for a long time. Many of our healthcare customers utilize us for VDI deployments. So recently, we completed a Citrix reference architecture with Windows 10, and we also have a Horizon reference architecture with Windows 7. So now, across these two reference architecture, we are able to provide market-leading densities. So with a knowledge worker workload for Windows 10 on a 3-node Pivot 3 cluster, a standard cluster with standard resource configuration, we were able to support 501 knowledge worker desktops. And now this is with a standard configuration. We can always have a configuration with bigger CPU and more RAM and support more users per node because most often our bottleneck is not in the I/O, it's usually in CPU and RAM. And so by adding those, you can actually accommodate more users per node. In case of Windows 7, we were able to support 950 knowledge worker desktops on a 3-node cluster. So, both of those numbers are market-leading numbers compared to other numbers that competition may have put out. And the good part here is all of the vendors use login VSI benchmark tools, so you can compare these reference architectures to each other, apples to apples, and see how actually each of the system performs in comparison. So I just want to show you some of the performance outcomes that we are able to deliver with our HCI. And across the board, we are able to provide better performance on a smaller footprint. So here's just a raw I/O performance compared to a leading competitor, 4 nodes of that competitor system versus our 3-node system. We were able to deliver more IOPS. One, the IOPS that we delivered were of better quality. So we had 9 times more IOPS coming out of our system that were sub-millisecond latency than the alternative system that we tested. Generally speaking, our latency was 62% compared to the alternative. So more IOPS, the IOPS of better quality, and latency, overall latency much lower compared to the competing cluster. And these clusters were chosen in a way that, generally speaking, they had similar resource configuration. So you can really think of these as, equivalent to each other. And a 3-node Pivot 3 is able to do better performance than a 4-node of that competing system. So here you see VDI, another workload that I think is very common in healthcare. With Windows 7 knowledge worker desktops, we use Horizon 7 for this one. And now these numbers are publicly available. They're posted on Login VSI website. You can find these reference architecture for us as well as for the competing vendors. But across the board, whether it's a task worker or a power user or a knowledge worker, we were able to deliver market-leading densities per node. So that means you really need less hardware to support the same number of desktops. Similar observation here in transactions. This was done using HammerDB and SQL Server. Again, 3-node Pivot 3 cluster was able to deliver better transactional performance than 4-node competing clusters. On a per node basis, quite a bit more transactions per node. Analytics. So we did an exercise with Splunk, and this is what we found out. The way we are using our NVMe optimized data path, we were able to support indexing speeds of up to 13 terabytes per day. That means you can have 13 terabytes of data streaming into that cluster every day, and our system can index it very effectively. Just 3 nodes. We don't need more than 3 nodes to index this. And that's because we are using NVMe very intelligently and making sure that the NVMe is used for the right purpose at the right time. So indexing is one aspect of big data platforms, but search is another aspect. So from the search standpoint, we were able to deliver great search performance across the board, right? So no matter what kind of search it was, we were able to deliver better performance, whether it was dense or it was rare. And all of that really translates into the total cost of ownership. We deliver better value at the end of the day. On the desktop side, you can see that we are able to deliver the least cost per desktop. On the transactional side also, the dollars per transaction, Pivot 3 has the lowest number there as well. So some examples here. So Southern New Hampshire, a leading health system out of New England, is using us to deliver desktops to their clinicians and their physicians and nurses. These desktops are mission critical, right? And they really wanted to build this so it would perform 24/7, 100% uptime. And they were really looking to improve the productivity of nurses and doctors, so that they would spend less time with technology and they would have more time with patients, and they will have better access with the data that they need to make their decisions. So they use Pivot 3, they use their dual site configuration using F5 load balancers. And this deployment has been in production for over 3 years now, and it has had zero outages, planned or unplanned. So that means the system's been up and running for last more than 3 years with no downtime. Really, though, the important outcome for Southern New Hampshire was the improvement in the productivity. You see the numbers like reduction in login times, but that really translates to doctors and nurses having quicker access to their patient records, having easier workflows as they conduct their business, and be able to spend more time with patients and be able to make better decisions for the patients. NHS of the UK, National Health Services of the UK, they're using us to support a large number of desktops. Up to 20,000 desktops could be served from these Pivot 3 clusters, and these are across many different locations. So they use Pivot 3 to do that. They were able to reduce login times. They were able to reduce TCO substantially, 55% reduction in TCO. That's quite a lot. And then the centralized, simplified HCI management that comes with the way Pivot 3 is managed. So this is another interesting example, Life Sciences Bio. So they are using Pivot 3 for really multiple mixed workloads. They have VDI as a key workload that they're using Pivot 3 for, but they also have other transactional and performance hungry applications sharing that same infrastructure. So they have MySQL, NoSQL sort of databases and back office applications mixed together with high performance virtual desktops. These virtual desktops are for developers, so they require to be high performance. They are latency and response time sensitive, and they are graphically intensive as well. They're using a 5-node flash cluster to serve up this entire infrastructure, multiple applications with VDI, and they're using these quality of service policies really to ensure that the VDI performance does not suffer because some non-critical application is hogging up all the resources, and that has worked really well for them. And so you see that in the results, significant reduction in the response times that the developers experience when they access their desktops, but also sub-millisecond latencies for the transactional databases. So not only were they able to consolidate these mixed applications, they were able to do so while meeting all the performance requirements and reducing hardware footprint. So to summarize, I would say, with Pivot 3, you can expect a few things, right? One is the way we are architected, we can support substantially higher density per node, and that means you will have to buy substantially less hardware. Typically, this comes down to about 30 to 40% reduction in the hardware footprint. Guaranteed application SLA, the way we are using intelligence engine and our policy-based quality of service, you can ensure application performance by assigning them the right policies. And the system really takes care of it behind the scene. And that really eliminates a lot of cumbersome day-to-day storage tuning that goes on, especially in the VDI environment and transactional environments. Performance is key, and performance tuning is a big resource overhead. So we can completely eliminate that with our policies. And then lastly, flexible, scalable architecture. As it's time to, one, you can choose a wide range of form factors as your deployment choice. But when it's time to scale, you can really scale to address the specific bottleneck. You can use storage optimized nodes, you can use compute optimized nodes, you can have GPU dense nodes, or you can mix and match flash and hybrid based on the requirements. So all of this put together, I think, optimizes the way you can consolidate your workloads as well as your VDI. And with that, I'll say, I would encourage you to go to pivot3.com/solutions and learn about all of our solutions there, including end-user computing. So, David, with that, I'll take any questions.
Yeah, excellent presentation, Vikram. We do have some questions for you from the audience. Let's see. While we do that, I'm going to pop up this poll question for the audience. We'll just leave that up. What additional information would you like about the Pivot 3 solution? And we do have a question here. They're asking, how does software licensing work with the Pivot 3 solution? For example, for the Pivot 3 software versus the hypervisor versus the hardware, how does that, do they get that all from Pivot 3, or how does that work?
They can get. They have an option of getting that all from Pivot 3, including, for example, Horizon. software for VDI. So we believe in giving a choice, right? So we have our own branded appliances that we ship out of our factory that come with Pivot 3 deployed, and that then you essentially get all the licenses you require in that box. But if you have a different model where you want to source your hardware from one of the other vendors, and you want to buy only Pivot 3 software to deploy on that hardware, that's also another way of doing it. So we support both. We support an appliance-based model, or we support a software-based model. We also resell some of the components like Horizon. Many of our customers are using Horizon as the primary way of delivering virtual desktops, and thus we can resell Horizon as a part of a complete solution.
Very nice, very nice. Okay. I know a lot of healthcare organizations are concerned about security and compliance. This person's asking about encryption and other security features. What's available with this solution? So we do offer encryption out of the box, native encryption with an all-inclusive license model, so you don't have to pay anything extra for the encryption. It comes with the system, and it's a very efficient encryption in the sense that it has next to no overhead of encryption. We are integrating with Intel APIs in order to achieve that, and as a result, with most encryption, you'll see substantial and noticeable performance degradation. You don't see that with us, and so that's one option. But you also can use one of our partner offerings, for example, hinders, if you have more sophisticated encryption needs, or you're thinking about geofencing, things of that nature. We can work with a partner called hinders to do that. Okay. Very nice. Let's see. Adam's asking about cloud offerings with Pivot 3. How can the cloud connect to the Pivot 3 solution, and you can leverage that for maybe data protection or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So multi-cloud management, I think, is one of the key areas of our intelligence engine, right? So we do offer native cloud connectivity into Amazon today. So we have a product called Pivot 3 Acuity Cloud Edition that actually runs in Amazon EC2, and you can use that in conjunction with your on-prem Pivot 3 infrastructure to use Amazon as your backup or replication tier. And you can manage all of that infrastructure. You can have multiple systems, multiple Pivot 3 on-prem systems at multiple locations, replicating to that one target, and you can manage all of these data sets, the physical ones and the cloud ones, together through one console. So we do offer that out of the box. For more sophisticated use cases like workload migration, we work with partners in enabling that. But in my observation today, the big part of public cloud, the usage of public cloud is for backup. I would say 80 to 90% use cases of use of public cloud are towards backup, and we can optimize that out of the box with our native Acuity Cloud Edition replication.
Okay. And then is there kind of a common trigger point or entry point for customers with Pivot 3 and healthcare? I mean, is it when they're expanding, opening up new offices? Is it aging storage solutions, or is it just all across the board?
Well, it depends on what's driving the refresh. And most of the time, it coincides with infrastructure refresh. You have old aging infrastructure that is coming off of maintenance, and you're starting to look at new infrastructure that can hopefully help you be more agile, help you reduce your hardware footprint. And that's usually the situation where most of the healthcare customers start looking at hyper-converged infrastructure. There may be some other initiatives like virtual desktops, which may be, you may be virtualizing your desktops for the first time, and that may have a business driver such as improved physician productivity, right? So depending on the situation, but I think in a lot of cases it coincides with infrastructure refresh cycles.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have for now, but a really great presentation. Thank you for being on today, Vikram.
Thank you, David.
For more information on Pivot 3, go to the Handouts tab right there and just click on the Pivot 3 URL. That will take you to the Pivot 3 website and their resources portal, and from there you can download all the different resources that Vikram talked about in his presentation, as well as many more forms of resources so that you can learn more. And we did our Q&A, and now it's time for our next presentation on today's event. This is the last presentation on the event, and we'll have our prize giveaway after this presentation, so make sure you stick around for that. And now I'm excited to introduce our next and final presenter on today's Healthcare EcoCast. That is Mr. Andre Leibovich, Field CTO at Datrium. Take it away, Andre.
So today what I want to do here is demonstrate how Datrium technology and the Automatrix platform help you to deliver instant outcomes when it comes to healthcare and health IT. So let's start looking at some of the key healthcare use cases that are currently supported by Datrium. And we do have customers in each one of those verticals, those segments. So first of all, Datrium DVX architecture works flawlessly with the EHR and PACS demanding performance requirements. And we also have a recent validation by IOMark that I'm going to talk in a bit, where it ranks Datrium as the fastest and most scalable platform in the industry. When it comes to health IT, and we start talking about data growth and patient IoT or bring your own device, consumerization, analytics, Datrium can also help you with that. Of course, IT and market consolidation in the healthcare space is happening all the time, and the ability to easily integrate multiple sites and cloud and bringing all that consolidation together, managing everything through a single pane of glass becomes really important. Now, where I'm going to spend a little bit more time is regulatory and compliance. So, HIPAA, high-tech, state and federal, data directives, meaningful use of data. So Datrium has what's called Datrium blanket encryption that provides end-to-end encryption with full data reduction to secure PHI data, like protected health information, running on hosts, in-flight, at rest. It's FIPS validated. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that during my presentation. And also, uptime and availability, ever more important in healthcare organizations. So maintaining mission critical levels of availability using the Datrium resiliency is very, very easy. And it comes also with integrated data protection. With that, also some of the EMR and PACS and solutions at the bottom of the slides that we support today. And we do have customers. Let me go into the next slide. And this is what I'm planning to cover today. So I'm talking about a little bit about world-class performance for clinical applications running in EMRs and EHRs on Datrium platform, our built-in data protection with zero RTO, how you can bring your applications back online right after failure, how to recover from ransomware using Datrium technology, our native encryption, and also Control Shift, which is our automated disaster recovery, the ability to bring your entire data center or your entire infrastructure back online in a DR data center or even in the cloud. And finally, how Datrium will help you reduce complexity and some customer use cases. The first thing to be aware of is the Automatrix platform. This is the umbrella technology for all the Datrium solutions and products. Datrium, on its core, converges 5 different data functions: primary storage, backup, disaster recovery, encryption, and data mobility. But more interestingly is that when you move your workloads around, if you have to move them around, all the policies that you apply to a virtual machine or to an application will follow that application whenever it goes to a different site or to the cloud if you're still running on the Datrium platform, on the Automatrix platform. And what that gives you, not only beyond portability, is that a uniform experience, whatever you manage in your applications, be it on-premise or in the cloud. When you look from the top, we're really talking about 3 different products. Datrium DVX is the product that runs in your data center, in your private cloud, and it provides primary storage, backup, disaster recovery, encryption, and data mobility. You can have multiple DVX in your data center, or you can have multiple data centers with DVX. Now you can also have a third-party provider like a CSP running DVX and you are replicating to that partner just as a DR solution. Then you also have on the right side Cloud EVX. Cloud EVX, I like to call it like the tape library on your cloud. So that's where you're gonna send all your backups to be stored for long term. So it's your long-term archiving. It runs on AWS and will soon be running on Azure. And then on top, Control Shift. Control Shift is the aggregator. It controls all your deployments. It provides a single unified view across all your deployments, be it on-premise or on the cloud. And it has the ability to completely automate and orchestrate your disaster recovery between data centers or cloud. Now, there is a lot of talk about disaggregated ACI, and this is exactly what Datrium is. It's disaggregated. We disaggregate compute from capacity, so performance from capacity. So you have the ability to increase the compute layer, the performance layer, from one server all the way to 128 servers in a single system, and the data nodes, which is the capacity layer, from one data node to 10 data nodes. This is a really enterprise and robust system, and we know that we've done all the tests ourselves, but unless we validate that with third-party organizations, it's just our own word. So we knew the system is performant. So we partnered with IOMark, and we went to the Dell labs where they have 128 servers. We don't have 128 servers to do the test with 10 data nodes. And IOMark, and this is a public benchmark, it can be downloaded from iomark.org, validated that Datrium is 10 times faster than the fastest HCI solution and 5 times faster than the fastest all-flash array solution. Now, that is great, but also with a third of the latency of both and all the data features on. So compression, deduplication, erasure coding, encryption, everything on. This is an incredible achievement that no vendor on the market has been able to compare so far. Now, performance is one thing. You also need to make sure your data is fully protected. Datrium disaggregated solution enables you to do very interesting things when it comes to backup and snapshots. So the first of all is you can replicate. You can take snapshots and replicate at a VM granular level. Now, those do not require backup window. So you can take snapshots and backups every 5 minutes and replicate to your DR site or to the cloud. Also, all those snapshots across all your deployments are searchable globally. And the most impressive is that you are able to instantly recover any of those snapshots from any of the systems at any point in time. You can also use that replication and the snapshots and backups and export all that to a vault on Amazon. Amazon is now completely integrated into Datrium. You don't even actually need to understand anything about Amazon. All you have got to do is enter your Amazon credentials into the system, and everything will happen under the covers, and it will be completely integrated, and that will become your long-term archiving. Now, what I like to call the business problem is RPO and RTO. Today with backup, if you do backup once a day at night, first you have a small outage, generally speaking, when you need to take the backup. But also your RPO could be 24 hours or 12 hours. So this is how far back you can go if you need to restore. With Datrium, because we do not have backup windows, you can take backups at any point in time. We can go back at each 5 minutes. So in case of ransomware or you need a disaster recovery, you know that you have the most recent data available for you to restore your operations. But then, how long is it going to take to restore that? Do you have to bring a tape back from your storage? Do you need to restore from a different system? So Datrium provides zero RTO. When you power off a application and you go into the Datrium UI through vCenter, you can say restore now, and it's instantly available to use and to power on. It provides zero RTO recovery for your applications. And this is a really big deal, because the last thing you want is be down for hours just because you have to restore from a different solution or a different system. I'm talking about protection and backup and snapshots, but it's important to understand as well, because Datrium architecture is disaggregated, it provides zero performance penalty for snapshots. Not only you can take multiple every 5 minutes, but zero performance penalty. So your applications will not suffer during those snapshots. But also they are immutable. So you have the guarantee that whenever you take a snapshot, those previous point in time recovery points cannot be changed. Now we also have the ability to have protection groups, do crash and application consistent snapshots, making sure the applications will be snapshotted with quiesced IOs, with the ability to replicate those between sites and cloud, and as I mentioned, instant recovery from local and remote snapshots. Now, when it comes to healthcare environments, there are many instances where you need multiple deployments for different use cases. You might have your CRM in production, but you need like 10 instances for development, 10 instances for training. And this is very common. Datrium has the ability to use a metadata operator to do instant cloning of any size without impact on performance or capacity. So this is a really big deal for organizations that need to clone multiple different databases, as an example. So let's talk about compliance or security. So Datrium has FIPS AES XTS 256 military grade crypto, and this is fully compliant, FIPS certified, and is certified and FIPS compliant, and it satisfies all regulatory requirements for healthcare organizations. It also does for government and other institutions. That's all good. Now, the interesting thing is that most of the solutions out there will only do data encryption for data at rest, which means only the hard drives are encrypted. So it only protects really against someone stealing your hard drive inside your data center. The chances of that happening are very low, but there's nothing out there that will protect, in the majority of the systems, of course, that will protect against data in flight and data on the host, against attacks on the data in flight. So Datrium, it has an industry-first blanket encryption. Data is encrypted on the host, goes through the wire, encrypted in flight, and then is stored and it stays at rest encrypted as well. And all of that with data reduction. So with zero hardware dependencies, and also with a built-in key manager. So this is a software solution that will protect your data from host, in flight, and at rest. This is unique on the market. There's nothing out there that can do anything similar to what we're doing with the data reduction as well. So finally, let me talk about Control Shift a little bit. Control Shift is workflow automation for DR. It will completely automate all the snapshots and the replication that you have in place between all your sites in cloud, and make sure whenever you need to fail over, you have a disaster event, your data center is down, you can reinstantiate everything on your DR site or the cloud. So Control Shift, as I mentioned, is a runbook automation tool. We will do continuous compliance tests, and this is a really big deal, because I've seen deployments where you have your replication in place, you have a DR solution in place, but I know 18 months down the road or 7 months down the road, when you actually need to restore, things are not working properly, because things shift. LANs have been created, solutions have been deployed, and so on. Because Datrium owns the I/O from when it's created through the wire all the way when stored for rest and snapshots and replication. And on the DR side, we have the ability to continuous test those plans that are created for disaster recovery and make sure that everything is in place and working fine every 30 minutes. And if something goes out of whack, we will alert administrators to say, hey, something is not right. So you have the guarantee and the SLA that whenever you have a disaster, you will be able to effectively recover. And then we also have the recovery to the VMware Cloud on AWS that will effectively meet your RTO requirements. So talking in terms of instant RTO for your private cloud, RPO in minutes, and then also the ability to recover from disaster or cybercrime. So here's some examples of what solutions Automatrix is replacing today. And those are real cases. This is a large telco where Datrium replaced a number of different products. Here is an interesting, very large government agency, but the interesting thing here is they are using Datrium also to replace part of their AWS deployments. And finally, here is a very large healthcare organization replacing a number of EMC products with Datrium. So in a nutshell, if we look at reducing health IT complexity, Datrium helps you to have zero storage management. Actually, there's nothing to really be managed from a storage perspective. You just manage, DR plans and, snapshots and so on, but you don't manage storage. There's no LANs, zoning, masks. It will remove the need for third-party encryption. We have our own built-in FIPS-compliant encryption. No need for third-party backup. We'll take application consistent, crash consistent snapshots, replicate those for you to your DR site or to the cloud. Elimination of maintenance windows for DR or even for upgrades on the system. Disaster recovery, completely automated, integrated into the solution with instant restart. I also talked about test and dev and the ability to have instant clones using metadata operators. You harvest all the benefits of virtualization. The solution is completely integrated into the VMware platform, the VMware ecosystem. And at the end of the day, we can run multiple different workloads, not only healthcare, but all the back office that you have in your data center running there. So it really helps to reduce silos. Here's an example of a customer that we have, National Physician Services. They're running 80 different clinical applications, running over $500 million in financial transactions per year, 6 AHS entities, and over 1,000 physicians. And they are very happy with the solution and growing as we speak. Those are some numbers put together by IDC when talking to our customers. As I mentioned, zero storage management, but it's really interesting here to see that customers are attaining ROI or payback in only 5 months, in just 5 months, just from reducing the amount of systems that they need to manage, reducing the amount of skill sets required, and so on. Also, if you go to the Gartner Peer Insights, you'll see that Datrium has the highest rating from all HCI solutions on the market today. And go there and have a look, read the comments. You'll see what the Gartner customers are saying about Datrium. With that, I'm hitting the limit for my presentation. So reach out to us. We have many healthcare customers running multiple different EMR and EHR solutions, clinical applications. Come talk to us. I'm sure we can help you. Thank you.
A great presentation, Andre. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good to have you on again. Thanks for being here. I really enjoyed how you talked about how Datrium can help to make healthcare so much more efficient. I love that efficiency. So we do have some questions for you from the audience. While we do that, I'm going to pop up this poll question I want to call everyone's attention to. We'll just leave that up.
while we do some Q&A. So first question I wanted to ask you is, they're asking here, how is Datrium sold? Like, what's the model? Can you bring your own servers? Does Datrium sell servers? How does that work?
We actually work both ways. You can bring your own servers with your own flash. All we deploy is our software within vSphere as a VIB. You can buy servers from us if you rather have a single throat to choke, but we are very flexible in terms of servers. We are really a software solution. You can even leverage your existing blades, your existing investment in the data center. You don't have to buy all new. And you can mix and match different server vendors and different server generations. There's no limit on what you can do in regards to servers because the solution has the servers working independent from each other.
Very nice. Very nice. I like that flexibility there. And I know you talked about this. This person is asking about data protection. So you said Datrium includes a data protection solution built into it?
Right. As part of the Automatrix platform, you have primary storage to run your application's workloads, but you also have a data protection tier we call the data pool. That's where we protect the data and it will remain protected on-site. But we can take also snapshots and replicate all that to multiple different sites or to the cloud. We have a product that I mentioned called Cloud EVX, where it is your tape library in the cloud, and you're able to simply archive everything there as well for long-term retention.
Okay, very nice. And there's another question here about ransomware. Could that data protection solution help to recover from ransomware?
Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. So because we have the backup and data protection integrated into the system and on-premise as part of the solution, we have the ability to instantaneously restore any point-in-time snaps from a application or from a VM and make it going live in place, in production, as you do the restore. This is really zero RTO. You don't have to restore anything from a backup system, from a tape library. It's instantaneous. If it is running on the system, if the backup is on the system in the same data center. Of course, if you archived and now it's stored for 7-10 years offsite, we have the ability to restore that over the wire, fully deduplicated as well, which won't be zero RTO. But for the most part, when you talk about ransomware, you detected now infestation started a couple hours or a couple of days ago, so it's likely that you have all the required snapshots, point-in-time snapshots on the system, and you have instant restore.
Excellent, excellent. I like that, built into the system. So there's another question here about control shift. Does that provide disaster recovery for EMR applications as well, they're asking?
It does. You know, some EMR applications, EHR applications, will have application level high availability, so they might take care of themselves, like from a database angle and so on. But there are many deployments where even those applications that support application level availability won't be installed or won't be active. In those cases, we are able to completely automate not only the replication, but also the failover, provide completely automated disaster recovery for healthcare applications like EMR and PACS and so on. That is absolutely true.
Very nice, very nice. Last question is, how do people get started with Datrium? What do you recommend?
So we don't have a minimum number of servers that you need to start with. All you need is what's called a data node, which is this repository for the archiving or snapshots. So you have the data retention or data protection in your data center. And then it's all software, right? So all licenses. And you can start with a single server or a single host in a single data node. And from there, you scale one by one in a pay-as-you-grow model. So you can grow all the way to 128 servers and 10 data nodes. And at that point, you will have something like 18 million IOPS and almost 2 petabytes in effective capacity. But it starts with one server and one data node, and you grow from there.
Very nice. So easy to get started. Start with a single data node. Includes disaster recovery and data protection for the data. And I really like the efficiency and performance. Andre, thank you so much for being on the event today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
For more information on Datrium, of course, visit their website. If you click on the Handouts tab right there, you can click on the Datrium link to request a demo and get started with Datrium for yourself. A really cool solution, some incredible performance stats there that Andre covered in his presentation. And with that, it's time for our final prize giveaway on today's event. We have another Microsoft Surface Pro going to Clemente Muniz from Illinois. Clemente Muniz from Illinois. Congratulations to Clemente and our previous winner, Jackie from Michigan. We'll be contacting you to deliver your prizes. If you didn't win a prize on today's event, no worries. We've got a lot of other upcoming events over on events.actualtechmedia.com. You can go and register for those events. We've got tons of gift cards and other cool swag as well. So make sure that you visit events.actualtechmedia.com. Also check out our LinkedIn page. That's where we promote a lot of these events and a lot of our content. So make sure you follow us on LinkedIn. We've been doing a lot over there. Subscribe to our 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. If you are a potential presenter or sponsor on the MegaCast and EcoCast event, feel free to reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. We would love to chat. And finally, I want to personally invite you to our very first training day event. This is a brand new event type that we're doing where we will provide roughly a half day of training by an independent expert on the topic. So it's more focused on training and education on a specific topic, and we'll have a few vendor solution presentations mixed in. But I think if you check out the landing page over at events.actualtechmedia.com, you'll see the multiple hours of training that you'll receive. And in this case, the topic is architecting a data protection and disaster recovery strategy. So if you're interested in DR for your organization, for your healthcare organization, make sure you check out this special brand new event that we're doing, the Training Day. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us on our healthcare IT vertical EcoCast event. I hope that you learned a lot on the event today. I hope that you really enjoyed the event, and I hope to see you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.